For years, people have been talking quietly, whispering behind closed doors, and wondering if the rumors were true. Pastor Jamal Bryant, known for his powerful sermons and his ability to inspire thousands, has always had a spotless public image. To many, he was more than a preacher. He was a guide, a mentor, someone who seemed to have all the answers. But beneath the bright lights of his stage and the applause of his congregation, there has always been a shadow. Small things, subtle hints, moments that didn't quite add up. People noticed, but most of it was brushed off, dismissed as misunderstanding or coincidence. And now, finally, after all these years, Pastor Jamal has said something that changes everything. Something that makes everyone pause and reconsider what they thought they knew. Today, we are going to talk about that moment, the moment he finally confesses what so many people suspected and why it matters. Pastor Jamal Bryant has been a household name for years, known for his energetic sermons, his ability to connect with people, and his inspiring messages. He built a reputation as someone who could change lives. Thousands of people looked up to him, attending his church every week, following his speeches online, and even sharing his advice with friends and family. To the outside world, he was the perfect example of faith and leadership. But like many public figures, there were whispers. Small rumors that never made the headlines but circulated quietly among his followers and in online communities. People wondered about certain decisions he made, his personal life, and moments where his words didn't quite match his actions. Some dismissed it as speculation. Others couldn't help but feel that something wasn't adding up. These questions, these doubts, have been building slowly over the years, creating a tension that no one could ignore forever. And now, for the first time, the truth is beginning to surface, revealing a side of Pastor Jamal Bryant that very few people were ready to see. Over the years, there were small moments that made people raise an eyebrow. Nothing that ever proved anything, but enough to make some followers pause and wonder. Maybe it was a private comment that slipped during a sermon, or a subtle change in his behavior that didn't fit the image of the perfect preacher. Some noticed inconsistencies in how he talked about humility versus how he lived his daily life. Others pointed to unusual decisions in his ministry, or the way he reacted when certain questions were asked about his personal life. These moments were often brushed off publicly, misunderstandings, taken out of context, or simply ignored. But quietly, a pattern started to emerge. People began to connect the dots, sharing observations online, in small groups, or with close friends. The whispers grew louder, though still far from official confirmation. It was as if everyone sensed that there was something important being hidden, something that could change the way people viewed him forever. And then, after years of speculation, the moment of truth finally arrived, a moment that no one could ignore. Over the years, subtle clues began to appear, pieces of a puzzle that many followers didn't notice at first. It could have been the way Pastor Jamal Bryant occasionally avoided certain questions during interviews, or how he seemed unusually guarded when asked about his personal life. Sometimes, a sermon would include a sentence that didn't quite fit his usual message, a small slip, almost unnoticeable, but enough to make attentive listeners pause. There were also stories from former church staff, people who spoke anonymously online, hinting at disagreements or secret struggles behind the scenes. None of these were ever confirmed, but together they painted a picture that was hard to ignore. Then there were the moments in social gatherings, charity events, or online live streams where his behavior seemed slightly different, not bad, but not exactly what people expected from the man they idolized. Some followers started to notice patterns, the way he reacted when certain topics came up, how he deflected compliments, or even subtle gestures that suggested he was hiding something. Slowly, conversations started circulating in small groups and forums, quietly questioning if there was more to Pastor Jamal than met the eye. The day finally arrived when Pastor Jamal Bryant decided to speak not in passing, not in an interview, but in a moment that would change how people saw him forever. It was during a sermon, live streamed to thousands, yet it felt intimate, as if he was speaking directly to each individual. For a few seconds, he paused, scanning the crowd with a look of hesitation, a rare vulnerability in a man who was always so confident. Then, in a quiet, deliberate voice, he began to speak. He admitted that over the years, he had struggled with decisions and feelings that were completely different from the image he projected. The words were measured, honest, and filled with the weight of someone finally unburdening themselves. He spoke about mistakes he had made in his personal life, choices that were misunderstood or misinterpreted, and moments where he wished he had been more transparent. There was no grand excuse, no blaming others, only acknowledgement of the truth, of the human flaws behind the public persona. The confession didn't shock because it was scandalous. It shocked because it was real. For the first time, people saw Pastor Jamal not just as a preacher, but as a human being, someone who had fought with his own doubts, fears, and imperfections. It was a moment of raw honesty that left the audience silent, some nodding in understanding, some in disbelief, and others just trying to process the reality that the person they had admired for years had a side they had never seen. In that moment, the rumors, the whispers, the small hints from years past, all of it finally made sense. And though the revelation was fictional, it felt incredibly real because it reflected a universal truth. Everyone, even those we put on pedestals, has struggles hidden beneath the surface. The moment Pastor Jamal Bryant's confession spread beyond the walls of his church, the reactions were immediate and intense. On social media, followers shared their shock, confusion, and even support. Some admitted feeling betrayed, as if the image they had held for years had suddenly shifted. "I looked up to him my whole life," one commenter wrote, "and now I don't know what to think." Others, however, saw the confession as a sign of courage, a rare instance of honesty from someone in such a high position. "It takes real strength to admit your flaws publicly," another wrote, praising him for his transparency. News outlets and online forums quickly picked up the story, analyzing every word, every gesture, and speculating about what it meant for his ministry. Friends and former colleagues shared their own stories, adding layers to the narrative that made the confession feel even more real. Some were skeptical, questioning whether this was a calculated move or genuine vulnerability. Others defended him passionately, insisting that everyone deserves grace and understanding. Despite the variety of opinions, one thing was clear: the confession had shifted the conversation. People were no longer talking about the rumors or speculations, they were talking about the man himself, the human being behind the pulpit, and how even someone admired and respected can face challenges and make mistakes. The public reaction, full of debate, emotion, and reflection, reinforced Pastor Jamal Bryant's confession, though fictional in our story, highlights a truth that resonates with everyone. It reminds us that even those we admire most, people who seem flawless in the public eye, are human. Everyone has struggles, doubts, and moments they wish they could handle differently. This story also shows the power of honesty. By admitting his flaws, he didn't weaken his influence. In fact, he made it more relatable. People don't admire perfection, they connect with authenticity. It also raises important questions about how we view leaders, celebrities, and influencers. We often put them on pedestals, expecting them to be above mistakes. But the reality is that vulnerability is a strength, and transparency builds trust far more than a perfect image ever could. And finally, it reminds us to pause before judging others. Everyone has a story behind the image they present to the world, stories of struggle, growth, and personal challenges that we may never fully know. In the end, the fictional confession of Pastor Jamal Bryant isn't just about him. It's about understanding the humanity in all of us and learning that truth and honesty create connection, not judgment. In the end, Pastor Jamal Bryant's "A Confession While Fictional" leaves us with a powerful reminder. Everyone, no matter how respected or admired, has a side of themselves that is hidden from the world. It shows us that honesty, even when difficult, is far more impactful than perfection. We are all human, and acknowledging our struggles is not a weakness, but a form of strength. In the end, Pastor Jamal Bryant's confession, though fictional, is more than just a story about a public figure. It is a reflection of a truth that touches all of us. No matter how perfect someone appears on the outside, everyone has struggles, doubts, and moments they wish they could redo. The real power lies not in hiding those moments, but in facing them head-on, acknowledging them, and finding the courage to speak the truth. That courage, that willingness to be vulnerable, is what truly inspires people, far beyond the surface-level admiration that comes from image or fame. This story reminds us that authenticity carries a weight and beauty that perfection never can. When we allow ourselves to be real, when we accept our flaws, and when we are honest about our journey, we invite connection. We remind others that they are not alone in their struggles. It's in this space between imperfection and honesty that trust is built and respect is earned. So, as you think about Pastor Jamal Bryant's confession, ask yourself, what truths in your own life are waiting to be acknowledged? How might your honesty change your relationships, your community, or even the way you see yourself? Life isn't about projecting perfection. It's about growth, courage, and the willingness to show up as you are, even when it's hard. And finally, remember this. Stories like this, whether real or fictional, are powerful because they reflect the human experience. They remind us to look past appearances, to seek understanding, and to value honesty above all else. Every person carries a story worth hearing, a truth worth respecting, and a journey worth understanding. So embrace your truth, listen to others, and never underestimate the power of courage, honesty, and authenticity. Because in the end, these are the qualities that shine brighter than any image, any reputation, or any stage, and they are the stories we will remember the most. As we reflect on this story, think about the people you admire in your own life. What would it mean if they, too, had moments of vulnerability they rarely share? How would it change your perspective? Share your thoughts, your reflections, or your own experiences in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about authenticity, growth, and understanding, because real connection comes from seeing each other as human, flaws and all. In the end, Pastor Jamal Bryant's confession, while fictional, is more than just a story. It's a reminder that even the most admired people carry secrets, struggles, and imperfections that shape who they are. True, strength isn't in hiding flaws or pretending to be perfect. It's in facing them, owning them, and finding the courage to speak the truth. That honesty, that vulnerability, is what makes someone truly human and truly inspiring. So, as we reflect on this story, ask yourself, what would happen if more people chose honesty over appearances? How would it change the way we connect, trust, and understand one another? Life isn't about perfection, it's about growth, courage, and authenticity. And maybe, just maybe, the real power isn't in what people see on the outside, but in the truths we have the courage to share on the inside. If this story made you think, feel, or reflect, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, talk about it, and remember, every person, no matter how perfect they seem, has a story worth understanding. Because in the end, truth and authenticity always shine brighter than any image we try to create.